I never thought surviving heart surgery would be what finally tore my family apart. "You spent our money? You're not even dying!" My own daughter Leslie shrieked. Her voice cracked like a whip through the sterile stillness of the hospital room. She was standing at the foot of my bed, fists clenched around her oversized purse, her face twisted into something I didn't recognize, something cruel. The nurse had just stepped out. Perfect timing, I guess. No witnesses. I blinked at her, still groggy from the anesthesia. My chest felt like it had been broken open with a crowbar. And in a way, it had. But it was her words that truly caved me in. "Our money?" I asked quietly. My voice barely made it past the oxygen tube under my nose. She leaned in close, eyes scanning the machines like she was looking for proof I didn't deserve to be here. "The surgery. The deductible. You didn't even tell me you were using the joint account." I blinked slowly. "I told you last month I was going through with it. You said it was my decision. You said you might. I didn't know you'd be so dramatic about it." And then, like she had just discovered the winning line in a soap opera, she hissed, "You could have died and spared us all this mess." I turned my head toward the window. A single shaft of light fell across my hands, still dotted with IV bruises. My hands. Not hers. Not theirs. She straightened her posture like a director, yelling, "Cut!" Her eyes darted around the room again. "We'll talk about this when you're discharged. I'll fix it when you're back. We can't let you keep making these decisions." And then she left. Just like that. The heels clicked once, twice, and faded down the hallway. No hug. No goodbye. No concern. Only fury that I was still breathing and had dared to use my own money. I laid there, stunned, as the door slowly clicked shut behind her. Not even dying. I stared at the ceiling tiles, and I swear they shifted. The weight of those 3 words crushed whatever part of me still wanted to believe we were just going through a rough patch. No, that wasn't a rough patch. That was rot. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My ribs ached with the pressure of it. The beeping on the monitor quickened just enough that I had to close my eyes and calm myself. Breathe in. Breathe out. Think. I had survived open heart surgery. But something far colder was trying to finish what the clogged artery couldn't. My own daughter. My blood. All I wanted was rest. All I wanted was a few days to let my bones settle around the stents they'd placed. Instead, I had just been served a warning. My own recovery was a threat to Leslie's plan. And when she said she'd fix it when I got home, I knew what that meant. Control. Silence. Erasure. But this time, I was listening. This time, I wasn't going back home the same woman. Let her storm, let her plan, let her threaten. Because something had shifted inside me too. And this time, she had no idea what I was capable of. A week earlier, the warning signs had already been blinking in red. I just hadn't wanted to see them. We were sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea, when I brought up the surgery. I had been so careful, so calm. "Leslie," I said. I spoke with Dr. Amiri again. He said the blockage is at 85%. It's not optional anymore. The surgery will cost around $7,000 out of pocket after insurance. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh, Mom," she said with that tight little smile she'd mastered. "Let's not worry about that now. Focus on healing. You'll be fine." I remember staring at her, trying to read between her words. That smile. It wasn't support. It was dismissal. "You said you'd help me plan," I said gently. "I wanted to review the account withdrawals with you, just to make sure we're on the same page." She sighed and stood up. "Mom, why are you always so suspicious? Don't you trust me? We've got this. I'm handling everything, remember?" That word, handling, it left a bitter taste in my mouth, because the truth was, she was handling everything. Little by little, piece by piece, she'd wrapped herself around every aspect of my life like ivy around a dying tree. "It's my house, the one my own mother left to me, in her exact words. This roof is yours. Don't let anyone stand under it unless they respect it." But I hadn't listened. When Leslie divorced her second husband and said she needed a place to restart, I opened my door, and then she opened my mail. She started taking over errands. Groceries? I'll get them, Mom. Bank appointments? No need, I added you to my app. Even my medications started showing up in her hands. Unasked for, untracked. She brought them to me in a weekly plastic pill box, and I swallowed them like clockwork, never questioning if I should be the one checking the labels. Somewhere between the knee surgery and the canceled trip to Portland, she had convinced the world, and maybe even me, that I couldn't manage things on my own. And I let her. Because I was tired. Because it was easier. Because I thought, she's my daughter, she loves me. But that love had conditions. Conditions I hadn't seen until I was lying in a hospital bed with tape on my chest and betrayal in my ears. Back at the kitchen table, a week before it all erupted, I had simply nodded and said, "All right." Leslie had smiled again. "Good, now let's talk about dinner." As if my heart, literally failing, was just a nuisance in her schedule. I should have pushed harder. I should have demanded answers. But I didn't, because part of me still wanted to believe she was helping, not hovering. Loving, not leveraging. I see now that wasn't denial, that was survival. Because if I'd let myself see her clearly back then, I would have shattered. But now the cracks were already forming. And the next time she smiled like that, I wasn't going to smile back. It started with good intentions. Don't most traps? Years ago, after my first fainting spell, Leslie sat beside me in the ER waiting room with tears in her eyes and said, "We should add me to your bank account, Mom, just for emergencies, in case something happens." I was tired, scared, and flattered. She looked so sincere, and I wanted to believe her. So I said yes. I walked into the credit union and signed the paperwork without even reading it fully. A joint account. Equal access. Just in case, she said again. The first time she used it, it was to pay the plumber. I hadn't even noticed. The second time, she bought groceries. Normal stuff. But then there was the new couch she surprised me with. A car rental for a weekend trip I wasn't invited to. An Amazon delivery of high-end supplements she claimed were for me, but I never saw them again. It was like standing in the middle of your own home and watching the walls quietly move in. And then came the whispers. The planted seeds. At book club, I heard she told Donna, our neighbor across the street, that I had forgotten my own address while driving. A complete lie. I had missed a turn and gotten flustered. But that's not the same. Not even close. Then it was Marie, at the pharmacy. Leslie said, "You get confused with your medications. Do you need help organizing them?" Confused? Me? I'd been a nurse for 27 years. I could recite medication interactions in my sleep. But I didn't argue. I just smiled. Like always. Because at the time, I still didn't want to believe she was turning people against me. I told myself, she's just worried. She's just venting. She's just stressed. But it kept happening. One afternoon, I called my old friend Harriet to ask if she wanted to come over for coffee. She sounded hesitant, then finally said, "I thought you weren't up for company anymore." Leslie said you've been sleeping all day. That one stopped me cold. I stood in my own kitchen, shoes on, hair done, soup simmering on the stove, and realized that everyone in my life had started to believe I was someone who couldn't handle herself, someone fading. Because my daughter had been drawing that version of me in their minds for years. And the worst part, she did it with my signature on the bank forms, with my permission. With my own hands, I gave her the power to paint me powerless. So I started keeping little notes in a drawer. Dates, receipts, comments that felt off. Not because I planned to do anything. Not yet. But because I had finally accepted something no mother wants to believe. My daughter loved my money more than she loved me. And I needed to stop pretending that wasn't true. The recovery wing was quiet. Too quiet for someone with a daughter, 2 grandkids, and a house full of my things. Day 3 post-surgery. No visitors, not even a call. The old woman across the hall had balloons, grandchildren clinging to her arm, even a husband who came in every morning with a different kind of juice, just in case she changed her mind. I had a plastic pitcher of water and a folded newspaper from 2 days ago. I wasn't surprised, but I won't lie. It still hurt. The morning nurse, Maxine, came in with her usual warmth, checking vitals and offering that calm cheer only nurses know how to summon. When she leaned in to help me adjust the blanket, she whispered, "You're recovering faster than most patients half your age. You must have something to fight for." I smiled politely. I didn't have the heart to say. I thought I did. She glanced around the room. "No family yet?" "They're busy," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Work, life, you know how it is." She looked at me longer than a nurse needs to. That look that says I see more than you're saying, but she didn't press. Instead, she adjusted my water jug and added softly, "Just in case," and slid a small card from her pocket onto my tray. A lawyer's card. Simple. Black text. No slogan. I stared at it after she left, turning it over between my fingers like it might burn me. I didn't ask for it, but something about it grounded me. That card, more than any gift, any call, any bouquet that never came, said plainly, someone sees what's happening. Someone believes you might need help. And for the first time in a very long time, I let the idea into my mind, without brushing it away, that I wasn't being dramatic, that I wasn't just sensitive, that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't what love was supposed to feel like. I slipped the card into my toiletry bag, under the comb and hand lotion. It didn't mean anything yet, but it existed, and that alone was a lifeline. That evening, I stared out the window at the cars pulling into the visitor lot. I imagined Leslie walking in with some forced smile and a bouquet she'd use as an excuse for not showing up sooner. She didn't come. Instead, I got a text from her that read, "Glad to hear you're okay. Let me know when you're ready to be picked up. I'll clear out the guest room so you can recover comfortably." Guest room. In my house. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't planning on helping me heal. She was planning on boxing me in. But I had Maxine's card now, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel entirely cornered. 3 days after I was discharged, I sat in my own living room and felt like a tenant in someone else's house. Leslie had set up everything while I was gone. My recliner had been moved to the corner near the window. More sunlight, she said, though now I couldn't see the television. My meds were organized in little trays, each pill unlabeled, no bottles in sight, and the mail, gone. "Junk, all of it," she said with a wave of her hand. It was like waking up in someone else's version of your life. Sanitized, curated, controlled. I nodded. I smiled. I said thank you. But I didn't feel grateful. I felt erased. Late that night, I came downstairs for water. The light from the kitchen spilled into the hallway in that strange, glowing way that makes everything feel like it's not quite real. Then I heard her voice. She was on the phone. Her back was to me. "She doesn't need to know the house is already in my name," Leslie said, her voice low but sharp, a tone she used when she wanted to sound mature and reasonable. I froze. She let out a laugh, tight, smug. She thinks I'm just helping. And honestly, at this point it's better for everyone if I just handle it. I couldn't breathe. She has no idea I already moved the utilities under my name, and the pension deposits still go into the joint account. So yes, the vacation is covered. Chill, babe. I've got it. Vacation. With her boyfriend. Paid out of my pension. I backed away before I could hear any more. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't burst into the kitchen or slam any doors. I just went upstairs, closed the door behind me, and sat on the edge of my bed. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel old. I felt awake. Let me be clear. I hadn't signed anything over. Not the deed, not the house, not the pension, but she had spoken like it was already hers. Like I was just some stubborn obstacle standing in the way of her life plan. She spoke like someone waiting for a paper to be processed, not a mother healing from surgery. And the way she said she doesn't need to know, like I was irrelevant, like I was already gone. That was the moment the quiet fury settled in my bones. This wasn't love-twisted or misguided care. This was theft. Dressed up in hugs, cloaked in errands, sealed with fake sympathy. I opened my closet and pulled out the old fireproof box, where I kept the deed, the mortgage payoff letter, the documents my mother had left me decades ago. My hand shook as I opened it, but not from fear, from clarity. She wanted a house? She wanted control? She wanted to erase me? Well, she'd have to fight someone a lot tougher than the version of me she thought she'd left behind in that hospital bed. I waited until Leslie left the next morning, off to get groceries or meet a client, one of her vague errands that always ended in a salon visit or some overpriced lunch she billed to my card. The second I heard the car pull away, I moved, fast, focused, like muscle memory was pulling me forward. I pulled out the fireproof box again, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened the folders one by one. The original deed from my mother's estate, still in my name. A notarized letter from 2004 when I refinanced, also in my name. Property tax receipts, every single one addressed to me. There was no transfer, no quitclaim, no signature that wasn't mine. She lied, flat out lied. I let the papers fall into my lap and leaned back against the closet wall, breathing like I'd just run a marathon. But I wasn't winded. I was furious. She had been telling people, confidently, smugly, that the house was hers. She'd created an entire reality where I didn't exist anymore, where my name didn't matter, where my silence was the same as surrender. But now I had facts, cold, hard, unedited, and I knew what I had to do. I took the deed and made 3 color copies at the old pharmacy on the corner. I told the clerk I was making a scrapbook. He didn't care. He didn't even look up. Then I walked 1 copy to Mrs. Halperin's house, my neighbor since before Leslie even graduated high school. "Can you keep this in your kitchen drawer?" I asked, just in case. She didn't ask questions, just opened a drawer and slid it in. "Anything you need, Eleanor," she said softly. "You just say the word." I said thank you. I meant it. Another copy went into a manila envelope I'd addressed to Maxine's lawyer friend, his name still tucked inside my toiletry bag from the hospital. The third I hid beneath the cutlery tray in the kitchen, right where Leslie would never look, because it wasn't digital, it wasn't logged. It was quiet. Like me. But let me tell you something. Quiet doesn't mean weak. I started a list that night. I titled it Facts. Just that. Facts. The house is still legally mine. Pension is going into a joint account she has access to. She lied to her boyfriend. She has not cared for me. She has monitored me. She is spending money she didn't earn. I didn't write a single feeling on that page. No anger. No betrayal. No sadness. Just facts. Because I knew if I ever had to defend myself, not to her, but to the law, or the court, or, God forbid, some concerned relative, I didn't want emotions. I wanted proof. She thought she had me cornered, trapped in my own house, disoriented, dependent. But she forgot one thing. You can steal my pills, my chair, my comfort, but you can't steal the woman who built this life with her own hands. And I was still here. I waited until Thursday morning when Leslie was out getting her nails done, French tips and fake kindness, her armor. I pulled Maxine's card from where I'd tucked it behind my hairbrush. I held it in my hand for a long time. My fingers trembled, not from fear this time, but from the weight of a single decision. The moment I stopped surviving and started reclaiming, I dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Darren Wolfe, Estate and Elder Legal Services. How can I help?" "This is Eleanor Daughtry. Maxine at West Grove Medical said you might be able to help someone who's being quietly erased." He didn't ask for clarification. He didn't laugh. He said, "Why don't you come in tomorrow? Bring everything you've got." So I did. I wore my best coat, the one with the blue buttons my mother had sewn on before she died. I brought a tote bag full of paperwork and my fax list tucked in the front pocket of my purse. The office was quiet, tidy, walls lined with books and framed newspaper clippings about elder fraud prevention. But the air felt safe, like somewhere you went not to beg, but to begin. Darren was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, but his eyes were older, tired, kind. I liked him immediately. I laid out my copies on the table, like I was dealing cards in a game I had never played before. He didn't flinch. He took notes. He asked questions. When I told him about the joint account, the utility name change, and the overheard vacation conversation, he leaned back and said calmly, "She's running a control narrative. Common tactic. Financial exploitation dressed as caregiving." "Is that a crime?" He nodded. "It's not just immoral, it's illegal, especially if the funds were used for personal gain. You're still competent. She's counting on the assumption that you won't fight back." That word, competent, it hit me harder than I expected. Because that was what she'd been trying to take. Not the house, not even the money. She wanted the narrative, the legal identity, the truth of me. "Well," I said, sitting straighter, "she's wrong." He smiled then. "Let's make sure the paperwork proves it." We started that day. Quietly, carefully. A new will, a durable power of attorney, a financial review. We pulled copies of the joint account transactions and began building a timeline. Groceries here, sure, but a $2,300 charge to a resort and wellness center. Out-of-state salon visits? Designer handbags? Not for me. The lies unraveled faster than I expected. And every page we added to the file made something in me exhale. Like part of me had been clenched for years and was finally unlocking. Before I left, Darren looked at me and said, "You're not the first woman to be robbed in her own kitchen, but you'll be one of the last if I have anything to say about it." I thanked him. Not with tears, not with drama, just a nod, steady, strong, because she may have told the world I was slipping, but now I had proof I was climbing. It happened on a Thursday night. Rain tapping on the windows like nervous fingers. I had gone to the pharmacy that afternoon, while Leslie was at her wellness class. She'd forgotten, again, to refill my heart meds. The very ones that had kept me alive after surgery. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I used my ID, showed the pharmacist the prescription history, and paid with the last of the cash I'd hidden in a mason jar behind the spice rack. When I got home, the house was quiet. At first, I was halfway up the stairs when I heard her slam the front door. "You went out?" she barked. Not asked. Barked. "I needed my medication." "I told you I was going to handle that," she snapped, dropping her umbrella on the rug without closing it. "Why would you do that behind my back?" "I didn't realize I needed permission to take care of myself," I said, voice steady. She stared at me, mouth slightly open like she couldn't decide if I'd just insulted her or confused her. Then she laughed. Sharp, thin, fake. "You think this is your money?" There it was. The mask slipped, just for a second. Enough to see the thing underneath. "This whole house, all of this, it runs because of me," she said, gesturing around like she was pointing to her empire. "You wouldn't even have groceries if it weren't for—" I cut her off. "Groceries I paid for." She froze. "Utilities in my house, paid with my pension. Furniture bought with my savings. You live here because I let you. Don't get it twisted, Leslie." Her face crumbled for half a second, then twisted into something cruel. "You want to act like that?" she hissed. "Then pack your things." Before I could respond, she stormed upstairs, yanked my old floral suitcase out of the closet, and threw it down the stairs. My chest tightened. Not from fear, from disbelief. She was really doing it. "You don't get to pull rank now," she spat. "You spent your last sympathy coin at that hospital. Don't think I don't know what you're planning." I didn't answer. I just walked to the living room, picked up my coat, and left. I slept in Mrs. Halperin's garage that night, on a cot next to a stack of garden mulch and a half-broken snowblower. She offered the guest room, of course, but I said no. I needed the cold. I needed the silence. I needed to feel the sting of what she'd done. Because sometimes pain is the only thing that burns through the fog and leaves you fully awake. I stared up at the rafters and whispered, "That's the last time she ever puts hands on my life." And I meant it. The next morning, I woke with a sore back and a clear mind. The chill in my bones was nothing compared to the heat in my chest. Mrs. Halperin brought me tea in a chipped mug that said, World's best grandma. It must have been her daughter's once. I wrapped my hands around it like it was a shield. She didn't ask questions. Just sat quietly across from me, flipping through a crossword, her presence solid and safe. That's when I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to the contact I had saved as DW just in case. My thumb hovered. No fear. Just finality. I tapped call. It rang once. Twice. Eleanor. Darren's voice came on, alert and warm. Everything all right? No, I said. But it will be. I'm done being quiet. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. I think he could hear it in my voice, that something had snapped, and not in the fragile kind of way. In the way a lock breaks when you finally kick the door open. We're ready, I said. Tell me what to do. Then let's move. He talked me through the next steps while I sipped my tea. Freeze the joint account, immediately. File a notice of financial misuse. Begin proceedings to reinstate my sole control over all assets, including the house. You still have the deed? He asked. I have 3 copies, I said. And witnesses. He chuckled lightly. I knew I liked you. Before we hung up, I asked, is this going to get ugly? His answer was short. She already made it ugly. You're just bringing it into the light. When I stepped outside that morning, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like some pitiful woman kicked out of her home. I felt dangerous. I felt focused. I walked back into my house. My house. An hour later, with my lawyer's list in one pocket and a smile in the other. Leslie wasn't home. Good. I went straight to the office drawer where she kept our financial documents. I took what I needed, photocopied the rest. Then I stood in the hallway, looking around at the pictures she'd rehung crooked, the furniture she'd rearranged to feel more like her Pinterest board than my living room. And I said aloud, no more. No more shrinking. No more hoping she'd remember who I am. She didn't care. She never did. And now, finally, neither did I. By Monday morning, every account Leslie touched started closing like shutters in a storm. Darren filed the freeze on the joint account within hours. He told me I'd be getting a new pension deposit line, one only I could access. He moved swiftly, with the kind of precision that made me realize just how many doors Leslie had walked through because I left them cracked open. Well, now they were slammed shut. She didn't know yet, not officially. But I saw the first flicker of panic when she stood in the kitchen that afternoon, waving her phone in the air, brow furrowed. My card got declined at the salon, she muttered, punching buttons. Stupid fraud alert. I sipped my tea. Might want to call the bank. Could be something serious. She looked at me sideways. Suspicious. Like maybe, just maybe, the woman who couldn't manage pills might not be so helpless after all. Good. Let that doubt simmer. Because by the end of the week, she'd be locked out of more than just a debit card. That same day, Darren filed the reinstatement of my previous will, the one that listed Leslie only as an emergency contact, not as a beneficiary. And just like that, her name vanished from every place she thought it belonged. You want to watch someone unravel? Take away the future they were counting on inheriting. He also filed for an audit of joint account withdrawals going back 18 months, charges for luxury spas, concert tickets, airline miles, things I never asked for, things I never even knew existed. But the ledger remembered. And soon, so would the court. Back at home, I stayed quiet, still, calm. But in my mind, I was rearranging everything. I moved her spare keys from the bowl near the door. I started boxing up some of her things. Only the things she wouldn't notice missing yet. Scarves, books, her old yoga mat, little shifts. Nothing that screamed, but everything that whispered, I see you now. She tried to be sweet that night, made pasta, sat across from me and asked, so, how are you feeling these days? Like a woman you underestimated for too long. Better, I replied, twirling the noodles calmly. Much better. She smiled. but I saw the flicker behind her eyes. Because sometimes, it's not what you say that scares them. It's the stillness. The quiet they can't read anymore. The silence that doesn't come from fear, but from calculation. Every step I took now was deliberate. Every click I made online, account changes, password resets, new filings, was a lock she wouldn't be able to pick. And for the first time in years, the house started to feel like mine again. Not because she left, but because I started acting like I never would. It came out in a whisper. No one was around. No audience, no confrontation. Just me, sitting on the edge of my bed, holding a pen. "She never loved me," I said. "Not as a daughter should." The words didn't feel dramatic. They felt clean, like water washing the fog off a mirror I'd stared into for too long. I wrote it at the top of the page. Entry 1, Emotional Record, April 18th, 9:42 p.m. And then I wrote down everything I could remember from that year. Not the big betrayals, the small ones, the ones people shrug off, the ones that slice when no one's looking. Leslie canceling my 70th birthday lunch because she had a tension headache. Telling the pharmacy tech I got confused sometimes when I wasn't even there. Telling Aunt Myra I didn't like company anymore, so she stopped calling. Watching her roll her eyes behind my back when I asked about bank statements. Replacing my reading chair because it was outdated, even though it was the one your grandfather gave me. I didn't know why I was documenting this, not at first. But as I wrote, I realized I needed proof for myself before I ever showed it to anyone else. Because when someone chips away at you for long enough, you stop trusting your own bruises. You tell yourself maybe you're too sensitive, maybe they're tired, maybe it was a bad day. But no, that's the lie they plant, so they can keep harvesting your silence. So I wrote, page after page, and with every word, the memory of who I was before her control came back sharper. I remembered that I once managed the entire hospice ward calendar on my own, flawlessly. I remembered I filed my own taxes until 2019, when Leslie took over and refused to share the return numbers. I remembered the last time I felt like myself. It was the day I mailed a check to a friend whose husband had passed. No one knew. No one told me to. It just felt right. That woman still lived inside me. She was buried under guilt, under obligation, under Leslie's constant gaslight smile. But she was breathing. And now she had a voice again. I wrote for hours that night. My wrist ached. My back burned. But I didn't stop. Because I was documenting a war no one else had seen. A war that looked like kindness. A war that used the language of love but felt like suffocation. When I finally closed the notebook, I whispered one more thing aloud. She used my silence as permission. Not anymore. It started with a phone call. "Orders are filed," Darren said. "This is your moment now." I hung up and stood in my hallway, staring at the house like I was seeing it for the first time in years. Not the way Leslie had arranged it, with her minimalist rugs and fake succulents and color-coded throw pillows, but the bones of it, the quiet pulse of my mother's kitchen tiles, the scuff on the staircase I never repaired, the creak in the third floorboard by the front door, my front door. And I knew what I had to do. I started packing. Not my things, hers, carefully, silently, like I was folding away every lie she ever told and wrapping it in bubble wrap. I pulled out boxes from the attic, the same ones I used when I helped her leave her second husband. Poetic, in a way. Full circle. The closet was the first battleground. Designer boots she bought with my pension. Silk scarves I never saw her wear, just tag for investment content on her Instagram. I packed it all. Her vanity items. Her perfumes. The little box of cash she thought I didn't know about in the top dresser drawer. I labeled every box, Leslie Storage, and taped them twice. When I was done, I asked Mrs. Halperin if she'd help me. She called 2 more neighbors. By nightfall, we had loaded everything into a moving truck I'd rented online, using my own credit card. The driver was confused. "This going to a new house?" "No," I said. "Storage unit. Temporary." He looked at the boxes. "She know you're doing this?" "She will." He just nodded. Some people don't need full stories to know the truth. Back inside, I stood in the echo of the space she'd once claimed, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Room to breathe. Next came the locks. I called a local locksmith Darren recommended. A woman in her 60s named Joan. Sharp as nails and faster than most 20-year-olds. "Changing the locks on your daughter?" she asked, not judging, just confirming. "She stopped being a daughter when she started being my warden." Joan nodded once. "Happens more than you think." She had the new locks installed within an hour. Code lock on the back door. Reinforced deadbolt on the front. 2 keys. One went in my apron drawer. The other, I slid into a small envelope and handed to Darren's courier, sealed with a note. "If she wants access, she can speak to my lawyer. I don't answer to her anymore." The house was quiet when I went to bed. But it wasn't empty. It was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream about confrontation. I dreamt about coffee in my kitchen, without anyone watching me. Leslie was gone for the weekend. I knew because I'd seen her calendar, still open on the family iPad she forgot to log out of. Weekend with Cal, wine country, paid for with my pension, of course. So while she sipped Chardonnay and lied to herself about being in control, I finished what I started. The movers came early. 3 polite men who didn't ask questions. They hauled every box, labeled Leslie Storage, into the truck. Her furniture, her desk, even the ugly faux marble coffee table she insisted modernized the living room. Gone. I vacuumed afterward, not for her, but for me. It felt like brushing off the last few flakes of a snake I'd finally shed. I placed her remaining mail in a folder marked pending. No accusations, no theatrics, just a record. Then I sat at my mother's old desk, the one Leslie had covered with one of her decorative linen runners, and wrote a letter. "Leslie, this is not revenge. This is reality. You screamed at me in a hospital room for surviving a surgery I paid for. You used my money, my house, and my silence as scaffolding for the life you wanted. And now I'm taking it all back. The house was never yours. You knew that. The money was never yours. You spent it anyway. My trust was a gift. You treated it like a weakness. The locks have been changed. Your belongings are in storage. The key is with my lawyer. If you want anything else, speak to him, not me. We are no longer in a relationship defined by blood. We are now defined by boundaries." Eleanor, I folded it once, placed it on the entryway table where she'd find it. And then I opened the curtains, let the sun in, let the air shift, let the house breathe without her in it for the first time in years. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I didn't even sit down to soak it in, because this wasn't a climax. This was closure. She would return expecting control, chaos, some desperate apology. Instead, she would find absence, precision, the unmistakable signature of someone who has nothing left to fear and everything left to reclaim. This was the last time she would ever walk into my home without knocking. And if she tried again, it wouldn't be me answering. It would be the law. She came back Sunday evening. I knew the sound of her tires before I even looked through the curtains. That too loud screech around the curb. That entitled slam of the car door. The rhythm of someone who'd never been told no and didn't plan to start hearing it now. I stood across the street on Mrs. Halperin's porch, cup of coffee in my hands, sweater buttoned, quiet, composed. Leslie didn't even bring her luggage inside. She just walked up the steps, reached for the handle, and froze. The key didn't work. She tried again, rattled it, pulled, slammed her fist against the door. Nothing. Then came the scream. "Mom?" I took a sip of my coffee. She pounded again. "What the hell is this?" Right on cue, the police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, calm and collected. One had a manila folder in his hand. Everything Darren had filed. The house deed, the bank audit notices, the removal of Leslie from all legal ties. I watched from the porch as they approached her. "Ma'am," the officer began, "you've been formally removed from this residence. This home is the sole legal property of Eleanor Daughtry." Leslie's mouth dropped open. That's my mother's house. The second officer shook his head. No, ma'am. It's hers. That's what we're telling you. I take care of her. I live here, she shrieked, voice climbing, cracking. But she didn't look like a caregiver. She looked like what she was, a squatter in designer jeans, standing in front of a locked door and a truth she couldn't control. You've been served, the officer said, handing her the folder. All further communication goes through her attorney. If you attempt to enter this property again, it will be considered trespassing. She's confused. She's sick. I stepped off the porch, walked toward the curb. Her head snapped toward me. There it was. That look. The one that had always worked on me. The fake shock. The rehearsed concern. The "Mom, what are you doing?" tone meant to trigger guilt and compliance. But this time, I didn't stop walking. I didn't flinch. I just stood on the sidewalk, hands folded, and looked her dead in the eye. She blinked like she couldn't quite process it. Mom, you're seriously doing this? I looked at her, and I said nothing, because everything I needed to say had already been filed, boxed, and locked behind a door she no longer had the right to open. The officers escorted her to her car. She drove off eventually, furious, humiliated, powerless, and I turned back toward the house. My house. I walked up the steps, slipped the key into the new lock, and stepped inside without looking back. The courtroom was cold. No drama, no audience, just hard benches, fluorescent lights, and truth stacked in files thicker than Leslie's skin. I didn't dress up. Just wore the same navy sweater my mother always said made me look stubborn in the right way. Darren sat beside me, calm and unreadable. Leslie sat across the aisle, alone. No boyfriend, no friends, no support team. Just a woman who built her future on my silence, and now had to face the noise of facts. The judge glanced through the documents, then peered over his glasses. We are reviewing over $38,000 in questionable withdrawals, including luxury purchases, vacation expenses, and unapproved financial management of a dependent adult. Darren stood. Your Honor, Eleanor Daughtry was never declared incapacitated. She is of sound mind and capable judgment. Her daughter, Leslie, assumed control of assets through manipulation, not legality. Leslie tried to speak. She asked me to help. She's been confused for years. I did everything for her. Darren slid a paper onto the desk in front of the judge, a printed transcript. One of the audio recordings I had taken on my phone the night she screamed about my spending her money. I'm fixing this when she gets back, Leslie's voice hissed through the speakers. She doesn't need to know the house is already mine. The courtroom went still. Leslie's face drained of color. But it was the next line that sealed it. She won't live that long anyway. The judge didn't blink. Is this your voice, Ms. Daughtry? Silence. Then she turned, scanning the back of the room. Cal? She called. Cal. He can explain, he was helping me. But Cal, her boyfriend, her co-conspirator, her vacation partner, wasn't there. Because Darren had subpoenaed his name on the bank transfers. And the moment the court date was confirmed, Cal's name vanished from every record. His number disconnected. His social media wiped. He left her. He used her. Just like she used me. I didn't smile. There was nothing satisfying about watching her break. But I did feel something click into place, like the final puzzle piece in a picture I hadn't wanted to admit was always this ugly. The judge ruled within minutes. Restitution in full. Immediate removal from any joint accounts. A permanent restraining order of no contact without legal representation. Leslie sat still, didn't move. She looked at me like she expected one last olive branch. One look of pity. One softening. But all I gave her was the same thing she gave me. Year after year. Nothing. Because you only miss someone when you realize they were your last chance at decency. And you burned it. They gave her 20 minutes. 20 minutes to gather what little the storage unit hadn't already taken. The court allowed her one suitcase. No keys. No second chances. No more pretending. She stood at the curb outside my house. My house. with her designer bag, one broken heel, and a look that tried to be dignified. But even her posture was tired. Like someone used to winning, who didn't remember how to stand when she lost. I watched through the window. Not gloating, just present. For years I'd vanished behind politeness, behind deflection, behind, "It's fine. She's just stressed." Now she was the one no one believed. She stared up at the house, maybe hoping I'd come out, maybe expecting one last hug, one tearful goodbye, one motherly apology for daring to reclaim what was mine. But the door didn't open. She waited 5 minutes, then 3, then 1, and finally she walked away. No taxi, no ride, just the same street she used to strut down with her sunglasses and her smug little smirk. Now she looked like a leaf caught in wind. Light, tossed, irrelevant. Inside, the kettle whistled. I turned away from the window and poured myself a cup of tea. Vanilla rooibos. My favorite. One she never bought because she said it smelled like old books. That's the thing about old books, though. They carry the truth longer than anyone expects. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. It was Marie, from 2 doors down. The same woman who once said, "Leslie's such a good daughter, you're lucky." She held a casserole in both hands. "I should have known something wasn't right," she said quietly, eyes full of something that looked like shame. "I'm sorry." I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. But I did take the dish. "Thank you," I said. "I'm still learning how to accept help from the right people." Over the next few days, the house filled with light again. Not noise. Not footsteps that didn't belong, but light, warmth. The mail was mine again. The groceries had only what I liked. And every knock on the door was someone asking me how I was, not her pretending I wasn't home. For the first time in a decade, I exhaled and meant it. This home, this life, wasn't quiet because it was controlled. It was quiet because it was finally peaceful.